Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, it could lead to a ban on diesel cars, prevent the building of a third runway at Heathrow, and will certainly make it more expensive to drive in our towns and cities. Air pollution has been called the public health crisis of a generation. But just how serious is the problem? Here's Mark LaBelle.
40,000 early deaths that result from air pollution every year in the UK.
Almost 10,000 Londoners each year dying prematurely.
It's a silent killer.
It seems at times we can get caught up in alarming assertions about air pollution, that this is a public health emergency, that it is a silent killer, coming from politicians, campaigners, and even us journalists. But how bad is air quality in Britain, really?
Tony Frew is a professor in respiratory medicine and works at Brighton's Royal Sussex County Hospital. He's been looking into the recent claims about the air that we breathe.
Well, it's not a crisis. It is a problem and it affects people's health. But when people start talking about the numbers of deaths here, I think they're misusing statistics, and it leads to an erosion of trust. There have been tremendous improvements in air quality over the last 40 years. There's a lot less pollution than there used to be, and none of that's coming through in the public discussion of this problem.
So what does Professor Frew make of the claim that alarming levels of toxicity in the air in the UK causes 40,000 deaths each year?
It is not 40,000 people who should have air pollution on their death certificate, or 40,000 people who definitely died from this. It's a lot of people who had a little bit of life shortening as a result of the air pollution.
To examine these figures further, we travelled to Cambridge to visit a renowned statistician. I asked him about the data on which these claims of 40,000 deaths a year rely. They come from a study on how mortality rates in US cities were affected by pollution.
First of all, it's important to realise that that 40,000 figure breaks down into two parts. 29,000, which are due to fine particles, and another 11,000, which are due to nitrogen oxides. And I'll just talk about this group for a start. These are what are known as attributable deaths. They're almost virtual deaths. They come from a complex statistical model. Well, quite remarkably, it all comes from just one number. And this was based on a study of US cities. And they found out that by monitoring these cities over decades, that the cities which had a higher level of pollution had a higher mortality rate. They estimated that there was a 6% increased risk of dying each year for each small increase in pollution. So this is quite a big figure, but it's important to realise this is only a best estimate, and the committee that advises the government says that this figure could be between 1% and 12%.
So this 6% figure is used to work out the 29,000 deaths a year in the UK?
Yes, through a rather complex statistical model. And a similar analysis gives rise to the 11,000 attributable deaths from the nitrogen oxides.
So why does all this matter? Well, should we ban diesel vehicles? How much should we invest in cycling? Should we build a third runway at Heathrow? We need reliable statistics to answer those questions, but can we trust the way data is being used by campaigners?
I think there are people who have such a passion for the environment and for air pollution that they don't really see it as a problem if they are deceiving the public.
Greenpeace have been running a campaign claiming that breathing London's air is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Is that statistic right?
No, that's completely wrong. If you smoke 15 cigarettes a day through your adult life, that will definitely take 10 years off your life expectancy. If you're poor and you are in social class 5 compared to social class 1, that will take 7 years off your life. If you're poor and you smoke, that'll take 17 years off your life. Now, we're talking about possibly, if we could get rid of all of the cars in London and all of the road transport, we could make a difference of 2 micrograms per metre cubed in air pollution, which might save you 30 days of your life.
There's no doubt that air pollution is bad for you, but if we exaggerate the scale of the problem and the impact on our health, Are we at risk of undermining the case for making Britain's air cleaner?
And we're joined now by the Executive Director of Greenpeace UK, John Sylvan. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
You've called air pollution a public health crisis and a national health emergency. But in the round, are levels of air pollution in the UK increasing or falling?
Well, I think they're remaining, in London, for example, they're remaining fairly static. And I think that the...
But nationally, you said a national health emergency.
Well, nationally, I think if you look at the studies done on terms of where air pollution is measured, which is in 43 cities around the UK, it was 38 cities were found to be breaking the legal limit on air pollution. So more or less all of the cities were breaking the air pollution limit. And if you think that like 8 out of 10 people live in cities, obviously this is impacting a lot of people around the UK.
But we've looked at the emissions of sulphur dioxide. They've fallen by 95% since 1970. Nitrogen oxides are down 69%. Let me just show you a chart. Particulate matter 10, 72% down. There's the nitrogen oxides, of which we've all been worried about. That chart shows a substantial fall from the 70s and then a really steep fall from the 1980s. I mean, look at it. That's something that is getting better.
Well, you have to look at it in the round. It's not just...
That is the round.
Yeah, but if you look at NOx and you look at particulates and if you look at today's understanding of the
let's
health,
look at particulates.
of the health impact.
Let's look at particulates.
Yes, we can look
you mentioned them. It's basically various kinds of soot. There's the PM10, PM2.5. Again, we've been really worried about what they've been doing to our abilities to breathe good air. Again, you see substantial improvement. Indeed, we're not far from the Gothenburg level, which is a very high standard with PM2.5.
Well, actually, what you see is actually it's pretty flat. Over the last decade.
I see it coming down quite substantially.
Yeah, but over the last decade, it's pretty flat. And if you look at the World Health Organization guidelines, actually these are at serious levels and they need to come down because we know that the impacts, particularly on children, if you look at what's happening to children and children's lungs, you look at the incidence of asthma and other impacts that are happening to children, particularly in cities, particularly in schools next to main roads where pollution levels are very high, the impacts are very serious. And you have many doctors, many professors, you have many studies by London University showing this to be true. But you know, Andrew, at the end of the day, the thing is, we don't want pollution. If we can get rid of pollution, let's do it. And also, it's not just pollution, we also have to get rid of CO2, which is causing climate change.
But let's stick with it. We're talking about air pollution at the moment. My point is not that there still isn't more to do. It's clear that there is. There's no question about that, and we need to do more. My question is that you seem to deny that we've made any kind of progress, and that you also say that air pollution causes 40,000 deaths a year in the UK.
No,
that's not true.
The figure is 40,000 premature deaths is what has been talked about by medical staff.
Your website says causes.
Yes.
Not
causes 40,000 premature deaths a year.
No, it says causes 40,000 deaths.
Well, premature deaths. But what we are talking about here is, can we solve the problem of air pollution? And if air pollution is mainly being caused by diesel vehicles, then we need to phase out diesel vehicles. And if there are alternatives and clean alternatives that will give better quality of air, better quality of life, will clean up our cities, then why don't we take the chance to do it?
I understand.
You know, you had the Australian High Commissioner on this programme earlier. He said to me, when he said, what are you on here for? And I said, air pollution. He said, air pollution, why is your government supporting diesel? That is the most polluting form of transport. Why don't you get rid of diesel when there are so many
That may well be right, but I'm looking at
alternatives
Greenpeace's claims. And you claim that it causes 40,000 deaths. It's a figure that regularly appears. Let me just quote the Committee on the Medical Effects of Air Pollutants, which said, this calculation, the 40,000 that was everywhere in Greenpeace literature, is not an estimate of the number of people whose untimely death is caused entirely by air pollution, but a way of representing the effect across the whole population of air pollution when considered as a contributory factor to many more individual deaths. The 40,000 figure is misleading.
Well, I've already told you what it is. It's 40,000 premature deaths.
It could be deaths by a couple of days.
Well, it could be by a year. It could be also giving children asthma and breathing difficulties.
We're talking deaths here.
It could be also increasing incidences of stroke and heart disease and cancer and so on and so forth. These are serious issues that many medical experts, including many experts at London University who have published reports on this, say we need to deal with.
Do you accept that air pollution does not kill 40,000 people a year?
I've already said how I define that.
So you accept that it doesn't?
Well, I've said it leads to 40,000 premature deaths. I've said that several times. But the
do
question,
you accept that 40,000 people are not killed every year? Because that's what your literature... I've got your website here. Air pollution in the UK causes 40,000 deaths each year. That's your website.
OK, I've just explained what I mean by that in terms of premature deaths. But the question is, are we going to do something about that? Air pollution is a serious problem. It's mainly caused by diesel. If we can phase diesel out, then we can solve the problem of air pollution, and we can also deal with the wider problem, which is climate change, that is also caused...
Right, but I'm not here to talk about climate change this morning. I'm here to talk about air pollution.
But Andrew, these
so let's
things
stick with
are
air
linked.
pollution.
These things
let's
are
stick
linked.
to another claim.
Do you want to live in a clean city? Do you want to breathe clean air?
Yes, of course. But don't generalise. Let's stick to your claims. You've also claimed that living in London all your life is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's not true either.
Well, what I would say is that if you look at passive smoking, it is the equivalent of say, I don't know what the actual figure is, I can't remember offhand, but it's the equivalent of about, the equivalent effect of about 10 cigarettes being smoked passively. And I think that the question is in terms of like, you know, you're just throwing me out all of these things.
No, I'm throwing things that Greenpeace have complained. Let me just be clear here. Greenpeace has claimed that living in London is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and that takes 10 years off your life. Professor Frew made it clear to us that living in London your whole life with levels of pollution does take time off your life, but it takes 9 months off your life. 13 times less. 9 months is still too much. I understand that. But it's not 10 years, and that's what you claim. And I would suggest you realise that that was a piece of propaganda, because your claim on the website that said that, you've taken it down.
OK, so I agree it's been corrected. And I agree with what the professor said, that it takes maybe up to a year off your life. But I think that the thing is there are much more wider issues as well in terms of the impacts on air pollution, particularly on young people and particularly on children.
And we all want better air pollution.
we can argue about the facts. And
but these are your claims. That's why I'm putting them to you.
We can argue about the facts, but it doesn't get away from the underlying issue that air pollution is a serious problem.
Can I just ask you what
we need to solve it?
Of course, and we are not arguing for a moment that air pollution is. Can I just say that? Don't you think that the way you exaggerate things, put false claims, in the end, for a cause we all agree with, getting the best air we can, you undermine your credibility?
Well, I absolutely don't support false claims or putting out false facts. And if mistakes have been made, then mistakes have been made and they will be corrected. That's what's really important. But I think the key issue here is how we're going to deal with air pollution. Clearly, diesel is the biggest problem, and we need to work out a way how we can get away from diesel as quickly and as fast as possible.
Come back and see us in the new year and we'll go through the diesel. It's an important issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been getting away with it.